To me, my brick fanatics, and music was probably about as much as we can get away with on YouTube. The Lego X Mansion is finally here, and it has to be said, this does look like an absolute treat for fans of modular buildings and fans of Marvel Lego sets. We've been getting these modular-esque Marvel buildings as an annual treat now for quite a while, and it has to be said, absolutely none of these are in any way inferior, because these are all absolutely fantastic, but this one, the Homo Superior one, is definitely just a cut above, just absolute gorgeous to look at. Now, one thing that does need to be said about this Lego set right up top, this may well be the home of Professor Charles Xavier, but the minifigure in the box, that's not Professor X. That man is an imposter. That is, in fact, real estate mogul Lex Luthor himself. Or at least, that's what this face has been used for in various boxes in the past. Yes, it's another of what we at Brick Fanatics call a Commander Praji situation, a single minifigure head that is used across various different licensed IP sets in order to provide various different characters that are completely different. Yes, Lex Luthor is the obvious comparison here because both he and Professor X share the same unfortunate follicle situation, but he is by no means the only other character that this particular minifigure face has represented. At one point, he was even Bruce Wayne himself. This face has also been used for the Mandarin in a Shang-Chi set, this face has been used for Loki, this face has been used for Yellow Jacket, so there's a bunch of other Marvel characters out there in the LEGO catalogue that have the exact same face as this Professor X, which is unfortunate, but what are you gonna do? Now, some people are probably watching this and thinking, well, what do you expect? I mean, it's a Professor X minifigure. The unfortunate follicle situation is really the defining attribute of the character. How else would you identify this as being Professor X? And given that this set is very much an XMen 97 or XMen animated series set, I would argue that a better Professor X would have had the eyebrows. You know the ones I mean. The brilliant Professor X eyebrows. Now, the X-Men have been enjoying something of a revival recently, which is long overdue considering that in the 90s they were like one of the biggest media properties on planet Earth. But then the rights ended up over with Fox, and when Disney bought Marvel, they were like, do you know what, Marvel? Just don't do anything in any of the comics with any of the X-Men. Just ignore them entirely. We don't want to give Fox more material to work with. And then having deliberately kind of withered that particular side of Marvel Comics, they then acquired Fox and therefore got the rights back and then were like, hey, open house, mutants everywhere. So we've had Wolverine and Deadpool, we've had X-Men 97, we've had the end of the Marvels, which I'm not going to spoil, but there's something there, and we're probably going to be getting some more X-Men stuff in the very near future on the movie side of things, and in general, I think there's another series of the X-Men 97 animated series revival coming as well. There's going to be a bunch more stuff, and it is clear, looking at the LEGO catalogue, that the LEGO Group and Disney are expecting things to go gangbusters from a merch side of things. Like the inclusion in the collectible minifigure series that we got, absolutely wonderful, and it's really a shame that those were mostly gone by the time that the X-Men 97 TV show actually showed up on Disney+. Timings are not always great for these things. Then you've got sets like the X-Jet, which stretches the possibilities in bold new directions as to how much the LEGO Group can charge for a LEGO set. They've been heavily reduced in a lot of places, but so let's just leave that to one side. We're talking about the mansion now, the really good one. Finally, a good one. The first thing that I think a lot of people are going to spot when looking at this set is, for one, Gambit, because he's having a moment right now, but also it's a modular building and it looks like it's going to fit in very well with a lot of the other modulars. In fact, specifically, it looks very similar to last year's museum set. It's working by the same 32 by 48 stud proportions. It's got the same columns on the front. It's more symmetrical than most modular buildings or modular type buildings tend to be. There's a lot here that is reminiscent of that Natural History Museum, but to me, it looks like it's going to be just a little bit smaller in every dimension, like a little bit shorter, minus that dome on the top, and then maybe a little bit narrower as a result as well, because it's got a little bit of greenery on the front that you don't normally see with this kind of Lego set. The specific breakdown of the sizes is that the museum is 31 centimeters tall and the X Mansion is 27 meters tall. So it is a little bit shorter when you factor that in by 4 centimeters. But then a lot of that is the dome on the top of the X Mansion. And so I think if you discount that as well, you're seeing a significantly shorter set. It's got about 1,000 pieces less than the museum, so that does make sense. And also, I reckon a lot of those elements have gone into things like that wonderful brick-built Sentinel, which, yeah, you kind of need in a set like this because it's such an iconic part of the X-Men mythos. But at the same time, there will be then concessions, I assume, on the inside of this set, looking at the different proportions of what the rooms are going to be like. That said, the rooms that have been chosen do seem like they have been chosen very well, because you've got iconic staples of X-Men. You've got the library/classroom environment there. You've got the Danger Room, which absolutely had to be there. You've got Cerebro, and you've got Wolverine's bedroom where he can sit and just stare at his blank frame. It's a fun inclusion. I also do like how, yes, this is visually similar to the museum, but it does things in the structure that is somewhat unique, where instead of having a 32 by 32 baseplate and a 16 by 32 baseplate next to each other, and then the whole of the base of the set is built up on that, it's built on 3 16 by 32 baseplates, which can then be pulled apart and potentially, I suppose, rearranged or what have you. But that does just mean that you've got a lot more different options for opening this up, for doing other things with it, for exploring, for getting in there for play should you wish to. You've got a lot more options there, and I think that's a really clever idea. It is, you almost could say, an evolution of the idea from the Natural History Museum, and there's a word choice that works on so many levels with a Natural History Museum and the X-Men. I think of all of these modular compatible Marvel buildings that we've had so far, none really reached the level of detail and quality as the Sanctum Sanctorum. And I will say that this one does feel like it's still just a little bit below that in terms of the extra level of polish and all of the little details and the structure of the building on the outside, and that level of extra just jazz that you get from a modular building that you don't really get from a lot of other things across all of the LEGO lineup. I don't want this video to sound overly negative, like I'm picking it apart, because genuinely it looks absolutely brilliant. Such a cool set, and I'm really excited for it. I'm just recognizing that despite having a slightly larger footprint than most modular buildings, it looks like it's going to feel a little bit more subdued, a little bit kind of scaled down, a little bit cramped compared with some of the other modulars that we've had in the past. And I do think that that says something about trying to adapt the X-Mansion to fit a modular lineup, because if you think about the X-Mansion, it's not a building that is normally stacked up in a terrace of other buildings inside of a city centre. It's more something that is secluded, something that is a little bit further away, something with some greenery around it. It's got to have like a big old basketball court, because you need the basketball court to open up so that the jet can come out. That's part of the cool X-Men aesthetic. And that's not something that you get with this set, because if you turn it around and you look at the back, you've got a dumpster, you've got a basketball hoop that's just up on the wall, and it feels like somehow the X-Mansion has been transposed into an inner city environment that normally it just would not be in. And this is to a certain extent true of the Natural History Museum as well, where that's a building which normally, even in a big city centre, would be on its own, would be separate, would have its own detached space, as opposed to being terraced or as part of a larger collection of buildings all stacked together on one street. I feel like that's a problem, and you do see these coming up quite often in LEGO lately as the LEGO group experiments with different things. That's a problem of adaptation rather than a problem of the LEGO set itself, where the source material begs for one particular thing, but what fans want is for it to be modular and for it to sit alongside the Natural History Museum and a bunch of other modular buildings, and so we don't necessarily want the X-Mansion to have all of that expansive greenery that it would have in the real world. Alright, let's look at these minifigures, because these are some pretty good minifigures, it has to be said, with the exception of Lex Luthor having snuck in there as well. The one that is going to be most exciting for a lot of people is Gambit, because as mentioned, it is Gambit time lately, thanks to, well, I can't spoil it at this point, can I? Like, everybody has seen this. Gambit is in Wolverine and X-Men, played by Channing Tatum, and a lot of people have been like, finally, a vaguely comic-accurate Gambit, rather than whatever Taylor Kitsch was doing at the behest of Fox in X-Men Origins Wolverine. This minifigure then is exactly what everybody would expect, and what people have been kind of dreaming up and fan designing for quite a while. It's very much in keeping with his design with the video games that we've seen before. Lovely hairpiece, sock head, and then the trench coat with the pink in the middle. It's gorgeous. It's exactly what people are going to be wanting. In addition to that, you've got all of the other minifigures, which are all... This is very much X-Men 97 X-Men. This is not Bryan Singer. This is not anything to do with any of the Fox films. This is pure comic book / cartoon cheese, and I love it. So you've got Jean Grey here, who's also wearing the sock on her head. Apparently these are like, I guess they were just cool in the 90s, but also they helped the artists not have to bother drawing ears, which may well be the reason for them. So Jean's got one of those. She's also got cool shoulder pads. You've got Magneto, who's got the proper Magneto helmet this time, instead of the long flowing locks that he had with the Quinjet one, for his redesign for X-Men 97. The Storm minifigure is perhaps not quite as cool as the one we got with the collectible minifigure series, because she doesn't have that amazing mohawk, which is just an absolutely brilliant piece. She does have a yellow trim now on the frilly wing things that she has around her arms, and that is nice. It's a nice little extra level of detail there, but it feels like a shame to lose out on the really nice mohawk. I like the Bishop minifigure here. I know that Gambit is the one that everyone's been the most excited for, and rightly so, because Gambit is the best X-Man, don't at me, but Bishop is a character that I was not really thinking about or expecting with this set, and I do quite like this design. It's going to come as a nice surprise. I particularly enjoy that lovely hairpiece that we've got there. So while not one that was necessarily on my radar, brilliant inclusion in the set. Iceman is an interesting inclusion here, because he's not really a character you think of when you think X-Men 97. And indeed this kind of snowy design, rather than translucent blue icy design, is very reminiscent, rather than anything else, of like Uncanny X-Men, the comic from the 1960s. So he's a bit of a throwback, and I know that this design has come up again recently, but at the same time I keep glancing at him and thinking, what is Baymax doing in this set? And then there's Rogue and Cyclops and Wolverine, and they all look absolutely fine. There have been a fair few brick-built Sentinels over the years, and to a certain degree there's not much that differentiates one from the other, but that said, looking at this one, I do quite like this design. It looks like it's got a kind of a chunky weight to it that some Sentinels in the past have not had. It looks like it's going to be fairly poseable and going to work quite well on display, which is a nice thing for a set like this, because I think a lot of the people who are going to be picking it up are going to be looking for something more display-oriented rather than a Sentinel that can be picked up and smashed and bushed and actually played with. All in all, while yes, this is probably going to be a little bit slightly less detailed than some modular-esque buildings that we've had in the past, I do think that it looks absolutely gorgeous. I think that it seems to be filled with lovely little references to X-Men past and to memes, and the lineup of minifigures are almost brilliant in all ways. Particularly the joyous final arrival of Gambit is going to please a lot of people. If you don't end up picking up this set but you just want that Gambit minifigure, be prepared to pay for him, because he's not going to come cheap on Bricklink. All of that said, we would love to know your thoughts on this set, so please do head down into the comments and let us know whether you will be picking it up yourself, and if there's anything that you feel could have been improved on this set, or whether it lives up to your expectations. Otherwise, if you're going to be buying this set, or indeed any other LEGO set in the near future, make sure that you use the affiliate link, which is down in the description, or the QR code that is currently on screen, which takes you straight to the LEGO website. We get a little bit of the percentage when you make a purchase using that link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps to keep the lights on at Brick Fanatics. Otherwise, make sure that you do all of the rest of the YouTube things. You know them by now. Give this video a thumbs up and hit subscribe and the notification bell. Go to brickfanatics.com for far more coverage of all things LEGO, including the written review of this set coming on the 18th of October, if you're watching this a little bit before then. Otherwise, it'll just be on the website. And make sure that you sign up to our newsletter so that you never miss anything LEGO related ever again. Thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely day, Brick Fanatics. Excelsior, etc., etc.